All right. Well, good afternoon. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's Glad You Asked. While we're waiting for folks to come in, we want to go ahead and get started with a couple of quick reminders before we turn the microphone over to our guest for today. I see her block is here, so we're really excited. I can't wait to share some great information with you all. So, hi, Teresa.
Hi, Tiffany, and hi, everybody else.
April, Hank, Chris, and Tonya. Thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to see you today.
Hopefully I can be helpful. We'll see.
Yes, I'm sure that you will. This has been something that our agents have been requesting for a long time. So before we turn the mic over, just a couple of quick reminders. The first one is that the vote for changing Alamance or potentially joining TMLS, that vote was supposed to be originally today, and it was pushed back for a week. So that vote will be next week. So if you haven't had a chance to get your vote in yet, there's still time. Make sure you get those votes in to Teresa by Friday?
Yes, Friday. That way we can tally.
All right. And then one other reminder, our Hillsborough and Mebane area agents are invited to a lunch next Wednesday here at the Hillsborough office. And that will be from 12 to 3. So you can stop in anytime between 12 and 3 and meet all of the new leadership at KW Central. They want to hear from you. They want to hear your ideas. So make sure that you stop in next Wednesday. All right. Teresa, anything before I introduce our guest?
Nope, I believe that's it. We want to give Tonya as much time as she needs because I know she has a lot of great information for us, and I know we'll have others who will join us. And if there's questions at the end, we want to allow time for that. So I'm ready. We can get started.
All right. Well, so as you all know, this is recorded. So if you're not able to attend the entire meeting, or if you know someone who needs to hear this information, encourage them to go to our YouTube channel to hear this very important information that Tonya Caddle is going to share with us. She is the director of the Planning and Inspections Department for Alamance County. And Tonya has decided, or agreed rather, to come and join us and teach us a little something about permitting, things that we need to know about permits in Alamance County. So again, Tonya, thank you so much for joining us, and you have the floor.
I will say thank you for the invite, because you're right. Y'all's group and your profession and our profession should work and do a lot intermingle between each other. So us collaborating probably is good for everybody. So I appreciate the invite myself. I do have a short presentation, a PowerPoint to share, but I felt like I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions and situations maybe that you all have been in to kind of give some answers and give some clarity for whatever you all might want. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then, if that's okay.
Yes.
Let's see if it'll let me do this. There we go. All right. Can everybody see it? Let me see. My Zoom seems to be acting crazy. Can y'all see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Oh, there we go. All right. So it's big in front of you, black screen with white letters, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So today I just want to make sure we all know this Alamance County. I know you said something about Hillsborough. So all of these rules don't necessarily apply in other jurisdictions, but for the most part, an inspections department is guided by state regulations. So most all the rules and way things are done are pretty standard across all of North Carolina. And so permitting requirements information from us in, let's see here, see if it'll let me move this thing forward. There we go. So question, part of what you had sent me was asking about when you need a permit, when you don't need a permit, those kind of things. And do I need a permit? For state of North Carolina, it says no person, firm, or corporation shall erect, construct, enlarge, install, alter, repair, move, improve, remove, Wait a minute, I just went too far. Hold on just a minute. There we go. Let's see, remove, demolish any building, structure, or service system, meaning by electrical, HVAC units, that kind of thing, without first obtaining a permit from the inspection department in the jurisdiction you're in. So that pretty much covers even regular building code through the state. Something as simple as picking a toilet up and putting a new wax seal underneath it technically requires a building permit. Now,
Tonya, 1 second, I'm sorry.
okay.
I am only seeing, and someone else let me know if you're seeing something different. The screen I see is still on the Alamance County Inspections Department permit requirement information. It's on that slide.
That's
what
need
I
a permit?
see too.
Okay.
Let me see here. So it's on the do I need a permit?
No, it's on the first slide.
Very first one.
I wonder why it's not moving forward. Let's see. Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
And then I've only had this happen like twice too. Did it refresh your screens? So I'm on a do I need a permit screen?
That's it right there.
Perfect. Okay. I don't know why it does that sometimes, but nevertheless, it's telling you whatever you do, even as simple as lifting a toilet up and putting a wax seal down. Technically, the state says you're supposed to have a permit for that. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, nobody does that. We don't know about it. But if somebody asks, that's the rules. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to come check that out. Somebody get a plumbing permit and do that. Some of the bigger things is if somebody does an addition, if they go in and change out lighting in their house, some people will put a deck up or modify their deck. That's supposed to have a permit as well. All of those kind of things the state says we should be involved in, and somebody should get a permit over here. And we'll try to get this to move forward. I guess when I hook up to 5 screens, it just doesn't want to behave. Come on. Oh, there we go. Do y'all see a different screen? Okay. Alamance County inspections, projects requiring permits. I thought I'd just give some examples of common stuff that we usually have people ask about. Converting a residence to a business. Now, some people will, even if they do a portion of their home and converting it to, to be a hairdresser, or we'll have people convert it to do like dog grooming, or to have like a tax office in there where you have just one person working, but you got people coming in and out. That requires a permit, and what we see is a change of use for that section of the home, and then they have to meet different egress requirements, exit signs, things like that have to change when you go into a business use. Constructing a deck, screening in a porch, doing a sunroom. I've probably had 4 of these this week of people asking, I have a deck, does it matter if I just put the screens up? Well, yes, it does, because now you're putting a roof on it, you're putting additional weight on it, and we need to make sure the supports are there. So they draw something up. An irrigation system, you do have to do that. Make sure you're not too close to what will be gas lines or any kind of electrical, and then to make sure you don't have the leaks or anything going on with that. Swimming pools, most people don't think of, and the picture I'm providing here is an above ground swimming pool that probably you could go to Walmart or Costco or something and buy. Most people don't think you need a permit for that, but you do. The only pools that you don't need a permit for is those little bitty, like 1 foot deep pools that kids play in that you can buy from Walmart. Technically, all other pools are supposed to be permitted through us. That's not a common known piece, evidently. And ceiling fans, that's braced differently in the ceiling than what a typical light fixture would be. So ceiling fans are something that you're supposed to get a permit in, not because of the ceiling fan itself, but because that's manufactured and sealed. But when you place a ceiling fan, it's a structural support to make sure that things aren't going to fall on the ceiling or hurt somebody. People think when they have an attic or basement that they bought the house, it was, raw. It probably had some sheetrock or something in it. They don't have to do anything else. But that wasn't counted as habitable space in a home. So when somebody gets ready to do a finish, where y'all walk into a house and they're like, yeah, we bought it 2 stories, but we went ahead and finished the 3rd floor. Probably pretty common. Well, so did you get permits for that? Do you have the final inspection on that? Did you get occupancy for that space? Those are the things that usually catch people in a home inspection or something, and then they're going backwards. They're trying to catch up. When they do the air conditioning units and the furnaces, those are very dangerous, especially if you're using gas. or electric if they wire them wrong. So those are things that we do pull permits on. And that's a 1 day, 1 trip thing that we come out and check everything out. Hot water heaters, this is a little bit different. The state changed these rules a few years ago. If you have a gas hot water heater and you switch it out for another gas hot water heater, 1-to-1 is what we call it. Same type, like it's not one of the quick recovery hot water heaters or whatever, then you don't have to get a permit. But if you're going electric to gas or gas to electric, or you're going with these fast recoveries, those do require permits. And let's see here, installing gas logs, attic fans, skylights, those are all structural, and part of this is gas. So that's going to require some different CO detectors and things like that. So we do require somebody to get permits for that. But let's see here. I think my computer's just slow to react today is the problem. Or it's just not going to react at all, I guess. So unusual for this thing to act like this.
You know, it always happens when you're trying to do something in front of other people, right?
Oh, I've been playing with this thing for a week. It's been fine till today.
Yeah.
But we do have some stuff that you don't require permits for. So I want to make sure we went over that. Replacement of non-structural cosmetics things such as flooring and wall coverings, moldings, cabinets. Cabinets is like you're not putting a sink or anything in, those are fine. And then residential buildings, unless they're 12 foot on any side, anything smaller than that, then they don't require any kind of permit. Now, if they take a building and they want to put electricity in it, you got to get the electrical permit, but you don't get the building permit. And replacing electrical fixtures and components with no new wiring. So you've got a light fixture in your dining room, you want to put a different light fixture up, we don't care about that. Y'all go ahead and do whatever you need on that. Replacing plumbing fixtures when the work doesn't go beyond the trap, seal, or supply shutoffs. So like you're replacing your kitchen faucet, you're not going underneath and messing with the drainage, you're good. Installing of low voltage exterior landscape lighting. I think most people would assume that if you're just doing something very small outside, no big deal. It's powered by a cord or plug into an existing outlet that's outside, you're fine. And some people will put the much higher tech ones that have sensors and they're turning outside lights on, all kinds of stuff. Those usually get a little more involved, and we do check with electrical on that. Part of the questions on here is asking about some homeowners things. So figure out, put a little slide together, what a homeowner can do and what a homeowner cannot do. The first caveat when I ask everybody is when they say, can I do my own work? It is, are you planning on selling your house within a year? So it's number 3 on the list, but state law requires that property be the owner's primary residence for at least 12 months after completion of any work. So it's 12 months from the time that we do our final inspection and approve it. If they are going to reside in it that long, or, you know, people change their minds in 6 months. It's not like they intend on doing anything wrong. Then they have to go back and get a licensed person to come in and pull that permit and say that it does do everything it needs to do. And we go back out and take a look. It's not something you can't recover from by any means. It's just you got to go backwards and get somebody with a license to do that. But owners are able to do their own work. If they're living on the property, they own the property, then they can do their own work as long as they're residing in it for the 12 months. And the owner doesn't have to have a license for anything. They can do mechanical, plumbing, electrical, or structural work as long as it's their home. And there's an affidavit that comes out with our permits that they sign and is notarized to say they are the owner and they recognize this 12-month piece when they pull permits here. So it's not a surprise. Now, whether they read it or not, probably not. They return them awfully quickly and there's a lot of words. So I think sometimes we don't get owners that are reading all the way through their paperwork. Next, I felt like we could differentiate. Are y'all seeing a residential and commercial slide? Very good. We're moving faster now. So for residential, when we get anything, whether it be a storage building or a house or any substantial piece, we only look at a structural review. We never look at electrical, plumbing, or mechanical plans for a residential project. We see all that stuff on site. We don't have to see that up front because our process works through, you want to do something, you submit plans. And then from those plans, once they're approved, we will issue a permit. And from the permit, they can start calling in inspections. So there's a little bit of a process through the state requirements. And for residential, we do what we call a blanket permit. When you pull the permit, that covers you for your mechanical, electrical, building, and everything, and plumbing as well. I've obviously thought a lot about plumbing. I put that on there twice. So it'll cover you for everything. And most people get their inspections a little bit out of sequence when they don't do this very often. But the way that the state has us do it is you get all your what calls rough ends in for your trades, your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing before you can call in a framing on any of the projects. So it usually starts with, if you're doing even a building that you want to put a bathroom in, you start with some kind of foundation, like a footing or a slab or something, and then you get the wire run underneath, you get the plumbing run underneath, and mechanical started, and then that's your rough end piece. So we do that inspection, and then you can start putting your studs in and framing up everything, because all that stuff will come up into the framing when they start framing up. And then you go forward with your finals and things. And kind of a state law that gives people a little bit of question is work that's done under $30,000. And that is, they give us an estimate on what they believe the cost of the work they're doing is. And then we have a calculator that the state provides for us to say, we believe that is a fair assessment of the work being done, or no, we actually say it's $110 a square foot, where you're saying it's $85 a square foot. So by state law, whichever one is higher is the one you have to go with. So if it goes under that $30,000, you don't have to have a licensed person to do the work. Even if you're residing in the home, you can bring somebody in that doesn't have a license to do the work for you. And that's a $30,000, not per trade. That's not just for building. That's the whole job has to be less than $30,000. For the commercial side, they have some peculiar things at the state too. We always do a plan review, but we review all the trades and the structural. So we'd review electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and structural for those. Now, we don't have to have plans for things that are less than 2,500 square feet. Not sure why the state found 2,500 square feet to be the threshold, but that seems to be a pretty magical number for them, where they don't feel like they need some pre-drawn information. So we don't require those. And commercial is not a blanket permit. It is one where you get your building, you get your electrical, all the other pieces separately. You have to get your building first, and then your trades can come underneath that. Like I said, separate permits. And through the difference for us for residential, commercial, residential has a very set forth process of how we do inspections, from the rough ends to the framing to the finals. But in commercial, you could have different things going on different ends of a building. So we allow any of them to call in however they need to. They don't have to call in the framing last and do rough ends first. They can call stuff in at different times, however that project needs to move forward. And back to the work being done under $30,000, again, doesn't require a license. Would say that's an exception to electrical. Electrical has some of its own codes, because it's probably the most unsafe thing that they can do, and catch things on fire and everything. So we do require licensed people to do that electrical work. Let's see if I can get this thing. Look, it's moving fast now. This screen is just my screen to tell you kind of our contact information, our website. I know you said this is recorded, so people can grab this anytime. Alamance County, probably different than anybody else. We get a lot of calls in planning and inspections about what a zoning district allows. And as a county, we, outside of municipal jurisdictions, we don't have zoning. So Alamance County, I won't call it free for all, but you can put within reason what you want on a piece of property. We have ordinances that guide, like if you're doing an industrial use, or if you're trying to do a junk car place or something like that. We have ordinances telling you kind of your setbacks and things like that. We do have minimum lot sizes for residential and commercial and everything, but we just don't actually tell you on each piece of property give you a list of the things that are allowed on that property. That's never been passed in Alamance County. So we get a lot of phone calls about that, and people are shocked when we say that. Appraisers, everybody's shocked, because we're one of, I think, 6 counties in the state that don't have zoning at this point. And I don't see that coming anytime soon. So we'll stick with that's the way we are. And that's, I guess, the way we intend to be for some time. We have, like I said, we've got ordinances on types of businesses that come in, things that our commissioners were concerned about, how things develop. They did give some guidelines on that. So those are fair questions, but we disappoint people a lot when we say we don't have zoning. I've said a lot. I know y'all have questions and you have example things that y'all like to ask about. So I'm open for questions.
Well, thank you, Tonya. That was very informative. I tried to take lots of notes, but my hand could not go as fast.
I'm so sorry.
And it's okay. It's
I
not.
put my presentation out. I did to make sure I said it right.
So it's a good thing this is recorded because this is really good. I want to go back to the very well, not the very first slide, but the second slide where you talked
Mhm.
about the things that do need a permit, and then there are those that do not. And
Right.
noticed on there it said ceiling fans, and I'm just thinking, things as small as that we don't think needs a permit. So as we're listing homes and walking into homes and we can clearly see that some things have been updated, what are some of the questions that we should be asking these sellers when we see or they tell us ceiling fan, we've added this, we've added that? What are some of the questions we should be asking to keep us and the seller out of trouble?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I ask people when they say they've made these changes is, so do you have your final inspection and occupancy if they do an addition or a remodel, or just a final inspection on what you did so we can provide that, in the file so that people don't have that question later.
Okay,
That you did, in fact, go through your local jurisdiction.
gotcha. That's very good.
And, a lot of people say, yeah, I replaced my hot water heater. It's like, well, is it the same thing you started with, or did you change some stuff?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Because you said 1-to-1 does not require it, but if they're going from gas to electric or some drastically different type of water heater, then yes. And I see a question here from Tara.
It's more of a scenario, as a buyer's agent going into seeing a home and being told that no permits were pulled because they did not want to pay the taxes on said updates. What would happen if it went under contract? Would the buyer, is the seller forced to pull the permits, or is the buyer going to get in trouble later down the road? It really scared me of that kind of scenario of a lot of work done and nothing pulled because they didn't want to pay the taxes on the increased value of the home.
That seems so minor compared to what they're about to get into. So I have a terrible situation to use for an example that's happened this year. I have a kid that's graduating college. I call a kid because he's far younger than me, but he's graduating college. He's graduating from Chapel Hill. He's purchased a house here. A week before closing, he comes in and says, my tax information isn't right. Well, you're in the building department. Unfortunately, I can't fix your tax stuff. But I pull it up and it looks like the tax number that he is referencing is actually vacant property. It's not a house at all. So what are you really buying? Well, you and tax can work that out. But the person he's buying from has completely remodeled the house. They have taken walls out. They put pretty stuff in the kitchen. They painted some stuff that I don't care about. Well, so he says, well, I'm going to close anyway. So he closed a week later. And of course, now I've been made aware of a situation, and one of our inspectors goes out and said, they've moved windows, they've changed doors going out of the house. They took out the main support wall in the house, even though it's one story, still the main wall. So we had put a stop work order on the house. The guy that did own it owned it less than 6 months. So a fair assumption that he was probably flipping the house, even though he swore his family lived in it. So I'm like, well, you're not licensed. And by my evaluation and what our calculators show, you did about $100,000 worth of work. So that poor kid is still not in his house. That guy has started drawing stuff for us to show us what he took out, but we're not there yet. And now that guy could go back, the kid could go back and get his lawyer to go after him because they falsified some documentation, obviously, to get it to where it was. But I'm forcing as hard as I can to get the guy to get a licensed person there, this, that, and the other. But he's not a licensed contractor. So I have a great place to go with the state. If you're a licensed contractor, they will take up our cases and go after contractors to get them to do the right thing. But this guy didn't do that. So the poor kid that graduated in May, I guess he's living under a bridge somewhere. I don't know. But he's working here. He doesn't have a house to live in, yet he's making payments on his house. So worst case scenario. So now somebody with a license has got to come in and verify this work. And we know that there needs to be a beam and some things put in because they've ripped out this main support wall in the middle. So yeah, worst case scenario. And this guy, to me, he knew, but I guess he didn't understand what all he was getting into because he wouldn't listen to what we were telling him. But yeah, worst case right now. So now we've got to go backwards with him and get him through this. And it puts a lot of burden on our staff because we want to help people, but we're not allowed to do it for them. We can't tell you how to design it or how to fix it. We just got to tell you this is what the rule says. So yeah, that's terrible. And it goes backwards, and whoever he's selling, the seller cannot pull those permits because it's obvious he's not going to be there for a year.
Right.
Somebody with a license is going to pull that.
Right. So
And
it does, it
get
just
involved with that.
holds up, they won't make you tear it down or go back to the original or anything like that. They just make you back step until it's done correctly.
Till it can meet
And
current code, yeah.
okay, all right. So, and then from a buyer side, of course, warning them profusely that this is a bad thing. Because then they can't live in it, from what I understand of your story, correct?
Yeah, so we put a stop work order on, big orange sheet of paper from
Yep,
us.
okay.
And that's a misdemeanor. If anybody takes that down and goes in a structure that we put a stop work order on, it's a misdemeanor charge.
Okay, all right. Good to know. Thank you.
It can get serious. Yeah, there's some criminal penalties associated with building stuff.
Well, that's what I was thinking was just something that nobody would want to take that on unconscious, just nobody telling them and thinking it's not a big deal. And I guess on the listing side, if you're a listing, I would recommend our clients to pull the permits and not just tell people, hey, he didn't pull permits. So
yeah, that puts everybody in a bad place. I know everybody's trying to close stuff as fast as they can. Somebody needs somewhere to live. That's why they're doing this. But best to give that fair warning and let them take care of their situation and you not have to get involved.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much.
Whereas this kid would have stopped his closing to say, I now know this, y'all need to get this straight. The kid would probably be in his house now because these people wanted to get rid of the house and do it, whatever it took to get out of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question, Tyra. I have a follow-up, Tonya. And this is a current situation that an agent is experiencing. So the question I want to ask, without going into details of the situation, I want to ask this question. Are there any cases where you or your department cannot go back and re-permit? For instance, everything's gone. It's been, the home has been destroyed or gutted. Now they've changed wiring, they've changed this, they've changed that. Are there cases where you can't go back? And if you can't go back, what do you do in those cases? What happens when a buyer buys a property like that?
So I guess the only case I've been doing this for about 10 years. The only place I think of that I had an issue where you couldn't go back is if they built into their setbacks or so close to the property line, they couldn't get a variance or anything. So they really did have to rent that down because they're in the setback requirements. But like you said, if somebody guts it and we're down to less than studs, and we've had that situation here about 6 months ago, that house has been taken down so much, everything's going to just have to come to current code, including their foundation. Because like if you are working just in the second floor of your house and doing some renovations, but you didn't do anything to the first floor, well, then the first floor doesn't have to meet current code, only the part you're making adjustments to. But if you go mess with the entire house, then the entire house is going to have to meet today's codes.
So does that mean if you guys can go back and take a look at things, does that mean ripping walls? What does that really mean?
So sometimes they have to open walls up for us to show us wiring it or plumbing or how a stud was done. We do have glorified stud finders is what I call them, but they can penetrate walls and see through metal and everything too. There are engineers that will come in and certify for a few $100s. They'll come in and do their investigation without cutting walls. We have to take engineer letters per state rule, a sealed letter that says that this does meet requirements. And mainly, we do have to go in and cut walls a lot of times. And that means a sheetrock repair, but we try not to have them pull like every bit of the sheetrock down. We have them cut where it's supposed to be according to the rules, and then they can patch that wall.
So if a homeowner does that, then they're just bearing the cost of repairing what was ripped out or all of that. Just
Right. Hopefully, once we get the wall open, it's like, oh, that's exactly what it needs to be, and there aren't any changes. Because you put the wrong size wiring in a wall, you can imagine that's got to get traced back to the box, which means you're cutting the wall open until you get all the way back to the box.
I see. Very good. Very
Mhm.
good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I could keep going with questions, but I want to allow you all. Yes, Sarah.
Hey, I have a question about what you just said about the foundation being brought up to code. And I was wondering if you could give me a couple of examples of why and in what scenario that would be necessary.
So I have a lady that, I mean, I call her grandma, but she's almost 90. She's decided to move into her parents' original house. So y'all can imagine when that house was built. Problem is, her grandson decided that he was going to help get things started. So he started demolishing inside the house, stairs on the outside of the house, and they literally had just piers of block every so far under this house. Because this was, I'm imagining this was built before 1900. And so now that he has messed with that foundation, she's got to go back in and retro a foundation to meet today's code on a house that doesn't sit probably between 12 and 18 inches above ground. So she's going to have something really special, and an engineer is going to have to design that for her in order to get it straight, because he went in and tried to help. Whereas if he'd have just left that alone and she just wanted to do inside stuff, we would have never touched her foundation. It would have just stayed the way it was built in whatever year it was built. So that's called existing code. If you have an existing structure, the part that you mess with has to meet current code. If you leave the stairs alone or leave the foundation alone, it's existing code. We don't talk about it and we don't ask for any improvements. So it's best people call and ask questions. That's what I tell them. When you figure out exactly what you want to do, call and ask us, so you don't get in or deep before you realize it.
So, okay. Thank you, Sarah, for that question. And thank you, Tonya. Anybody else? Questions? And even though Tonya did mention in the beginning, this is specific to Alamance County. However, some things may be general because it's North Carolina code. So don't feel if you're not an Alamance County agent, you can't ask a question. I see something in the chat. Alice is asking, so does that mean if you upgrade an outlet, the whole electrical system has to be brought to code?
No, we'll look just at that outlet. You didn't affect the entire house, just that one piece.
Okay. All right. Very good.
It seems silly to pull a permit for one outlet, but then again, you don't want that. Well, here's a piece that I probably hadn't shared. You don't want that one outlet to cause a problem and your house burned down, and the insurance companies say, hey, give us proof that the county inspectors came out and said that was okay. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't do that. You can't make a claim on that. You're out. We're not paying anything. And how many we've had that happen? Unfortunately, I think we've had about 6 structure fires this year that happened to. We have one guy that rigged up a light for his chicken house, which happened to be semi-attached to his house, left to go to the store to get a drink or something, came back and his entire house was engulfed. And because he rigged this up, the insurance company isn't paying anything. So he has nowhere to live. So big risk when you're not getting your permits and anything happens, then whatever insurance is not even worth having because they won't do anything.
Right. I'm glad you said that, Tonya. That's a good correlation back to your insurance and how one thing on this side affects something else. And then it could possibly affect insurance in the future, because we know that they check those type of things on these properties. How many claims were against this property? So I appreciate you saying that. Very good.
We got a lot of calls and emails from banks asking to verify this house was built then, but we see that things don't look the same as what the original did. Do y'all have permits? Now by state requirements, just for y'all's information, we keep permits for 6 years after a CO. So once a job is done, we keep it for 6 years after that. If it's beyond that, we couldn't verify for you that it was or was not done. It's just, we're going to assume maybe it was taken care of because we don't have any documentation.
Okay, that's good to know. Great. After CO. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Alice, for the questions. Keep them coming. Okay, in the chat, any electrical work requires a permit, even replacing an outlet or installing a GCCI.
A GFCI, yes. So part of what it said was that unless you are rewiring something, but if you're actually going into the wire behind it and rewiring, yes. Now I have outlets in my house that I wanted to put the USB plug outlet on. I didn't mess with the wiring on that. I really just redid the cover and facing, so that's not required to have any kind of permit. But GFCI is a ground fault. So if you don't have the grounding wire behind it, it's useless. So yeah, you're going to need to make sure you get electrical inspection on that to make sure it is truly grounding.
Gotcha. Very good.
Sarah has a question.
Yes.
I don't know where the raise my hand button is. I'm sorry. Okay, here's my question. And it's about what you were saying about insurance. So if a buyer buys a property either knowingly or unknowingly to have like a lack of code or no permitting was done or something like that, could their insurance also say the same thing if the house was not brought up to code, even though they bought it that way? Does anyone know if the insurance would or would not cover should there be an accident directly related to that item?
So I unfortunately was in a situation, I had sold my house and had to move into an apartment. Thought I'd buy something really quick, right? 18 months later, I finally found something. And that this whole crazy pandemic piece. So the people above me, she had a grease fire. So the sprinklers turned on and poured down into my apartment. So I was homeless living in hotels for like 8 weeks while they tried to figure this stuff out. Do you know when we moved back in, of course, their insurance company had contacted everybody's insurance this way to give that to the fire department stuff. Our insurance had been kept in contact with us to say, we're not going to insure it for you to live in until they get a CO back on that place. So I had to present the CO and verification before they would insure it. So I'm like, well, I'm not moving back in there until my insurance company will insure me. God forbid anything else happened, because we had already been hit by lightning before that. So yeah, they do ask a lot of questions.
And Sarah, to answer your question, if the insurance company already insured the new owner, they would be covered under the rates the home has incurred with past claims. So it would still cover because it's a new owner, but the rates would adjust because of the past claims.
Because somebody's negligence could haunt you if you buy something.
This is really good, really good. Just checking the chat. Yes, Alice, you did talk a little bit about retroactive permitting if they have to go back. So she's covered that. I don't know if there's anything else, Tonya, you want to add about retroactive.
Well, I will say if you pull a permit, you've got 6 months to call in an inspection. If you go beyond 6 months, that permit dies, it expires. After the first 6 months and you've called an inspection in, you've got a full year after that before it expires then. Now, permits are not transferable. If you get a permit in your name, but you're going to have a contractor come in and do something, then they're going to have to pull a new permit. And I have one situation where they had an electrical company come in, they got as far as temporary power, kind of let the job sit. And so now they got a different electrical company. And so they've had to pull a separate permit.
Costs to pulling permits, Tonya, costs there?
A minimum cost is $60. If like I'm coming out to check one of those ceiling fans or something, it's a one trip, $60. On the bigger like houses or projects, it's done based on the cost of the house and then if any additional trips they think they're going to need.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Anybody else? Questions? Ask away.
I have one that has come to me quite a bit. Tonya, can a buyer who does not yet own the property pull permits for it if they're in the process of purchasing?
There's a yes, but on that.
Okay.
They have to get some power of attorney from the current owner. It can be written very specific to the specific work that they want to have done. But if you don't own it or you're not a contractor, we can't give you permission to be on somebody else's or do something to somebody else's property.
Okay, unless there's a power of attorney.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of them are written very, very specific to, I want to redo the roof, or there's this, that, and other that I'm wanting to do they'll have a lawyer draw something very specific.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's something that they need to go to their attorney to draft, or are there forms that you all have currently that would cover that?
I do not have forms. We try not to take any kind of legal position, so I leave that to them and their attorneys.
Awesome. Like that. Love that answer.
Yeah, we specialize in building, not legal, so that's why we have a legal department.
That's what we say too, Tonya. We're not licensed attorneys, so that's not our job to,
I bet y'all get a lot of that, yes.
yeah, we try to fill in blanks. Really, that's all we try to do. Keep the questions coming.
Sarah has another one in the chat. Does the person who pulled the permit have to do the work?
Yeah, if the homeowner pulls the permit, yes, they should be the one doing the work. We always know people will get somebody over there to help them or to give them insight. But yeah, they should be the ones to be able to tell us exactly what nail they put in, where they put it in, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
Tonya, I want to go back to when you said Alamance County is one of 6 counties in North Carolina that doesn't have zoning. It's kind of like a free zoning. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that? What about, because when we go to the Alamance County records and all of that, we see what it's currently zoned as. It's residential or it's industrial, whatever it is, mixed use or what have you. How I'm just trying to wrap my head around, there's no zoning in North Carolina, only ordinances or overlays. So talk to me a little bit more about that. And if a property is conveyed as residential, does it have to remain residential, or can that new buyer says, well, I want a business here and there's no zoning, am I sure that it can be made commercial? So talk to me about that.
So when y'all go to the property cards and stuff, it talks about a zoning, but that is for tax purposes and what their law allowed to call it. Because even when you have zoning, tax and planning could have different definitions of what zoning means. So you would see 2 levels of zoning. But yeah, that's a tax thing. It isn't a planning thing. As far as, I've got several places that are like older homes. And in we do municipalities, we do everybody but Burlington, Graham, and Mebane. We take care of all their building stuff. So when we get into some of these more municipal areas that have water and sewer and things, people kind of, like you said, they'll have a structure that's residential where they've got all the water and sewer they can stand. They don't have to worry about a well and septic. Then they're converting something, like this one lady's converting it to a coffee house, which is really cool. It's like a 1915 house she's converting, except that she's making what we call a change of use. And that change of use means that that building's got to come into today's standards. So she's got mechanical and electrical, plumbing, and just ADA compliance, getting a ramp made to go up in there and get people in and out with the amount of doors they need to get out. Occupancy numbers come into play on commercials. So all of that has to be brought up to today's standards. And you can imagine what size bathroom you have in a 1915 house compared to what ADA requires. So there's sometimes some challenges when you get into that.
Thank you, Tonya. I just had you just summed it up. What we see on the deed is for tax purposes. Okay. Yeah, that was my aha moment of the day. Tiffany, I saw you came off mute.
Yeah, no, I also appreciate that example that she just gave. So if someone wanted to change the use of a property, their concern is not worrying about changing the zoning. Their concern is about getting the property up to current code.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I call a miscellaneous permit, and all our permits are on our website. But it's just an occupancy change, and they tell us what they're changing it to. And like I said, if it's under that 2,500 square feet for commercial, then we don't require plans. But if it's bigger than that, then they've got to go to an engineer and get an engineer plan set.
Okay. That is really good to know.
This is so good, right?
I know,
so complicated. I'm so sorry, but
yeah, this is good. This is really, really good. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, well, I have one if no one else does. What are the consequences? All right, so yeah, I'm going in to list a property and there was not a ceiling fan there. It wasn't even pre-wired, but the seller added one because they worked in electricity prior and they just felt comfortable to go in there wire that, put that ceiling fan in there. And oh, by the way, they wanted one of those. They wanted more than the Walmart kiddie pool. They wanted one of those big ones with a pump, but it's above ground, no big deal. So they go and do all of these little small things that you all say requires a permit, but they didn't get one. What are the consequences? But you all don't know. So do we, shh, don't say anything. What do we do in those cases where we now know that it requires a permit and that seller didn't get it? Are there any consequences to the seller?
I'm going to tell you, your home inspection report, they don't just give it to y'all. They'll call us and tell us of situations that we need to be aware of. They'll file what we call a complaint anonymously, and then we're going to go up to that house anyway. But, you know, people have to come in and pull the permits and give us the right documentation. The only other thing is they're double fees. If you do work before you contact us, it's a double fee.
Double fees.
Okay,
So if it was a $60 trip to look at that ceiling fan, it's now $120.
I see. I see.
But it doesn't stop the sell of your house. So there you go.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Very good. So what I'm learning is don't do anything without contacting your department is what I'm doing.
Because,
Okay.
you know, they changed the rules on us. Like this year, I think in October, they're requiring electricians to have more insurance behind them. And then what the minimum, they have 3 different levels of licensing and contracting. Those are all changing. So they give us rules. We had 200 pages of new interpretations this year for all our trades and stuff. So they change our rules all the time. So it's best that people call us. Don't assume that they know, because it maybe used to be that way.
Right. Right. I got you. I got you.
All right, we have a few more questions in the chat here. So there's one from Alice. She asked about, can't just change uses without some kind of municipal permission. So can you change a use without a municipal permission?
If it's in one of the municipal jurisdictions that we work with, when people submit us that change of use permit, we email it over to that municipality for them to sign off on. So you can go to them first, but you can just hit us and we send it over to them as well.
Okay.
If they have a problem, they'll be contacting people.
Okay. All right. So that's important to know.
But not for the ones that you don't work with, correct?
Yeah, if you're just in county territory, there is no other piece. It's straight building.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, it's okay. Another question. This one's from Gila. What about multifamily? If you want to change the property from single family to multifamily, is it still just bringing the property to code, or does more need to be done?
It is really a code thing. The big thing about multifamily is different than single family is firewalls in between each unit. And firewalls can be like 2 hour to 4 hour, depends on square footage, if you've got a sprinkler system, blah, blah, blah. And firewalls, that scares people when you say that. Firewalls are layers of sheetrock. So you have your studs, and I don't even know how much, it depends on, there's a 3/8 inch sheetrock and a 4/8 inch. So the layers depend on how thick your sheetrock is and what the fire code calls for. But that would bring it down to studs and start walling up where you're wanting to differentiate the 2 units, and then making sure that you've got compliance to get enough egresses so people get out safely.
Okay, so still pretty much just bringing it to current code.
Yes.
Okay.
For us as well, when you're in the county, you're dealing with the septic system. So you have to get your septic system checked with environmental health before you can really start those projects.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget the septic.
You will have a problem if you forget the septic, and you will know it very quickly.
Absolutely.
Tonya, you just said a word that made me think, just brought another question. You said egress. So if there's problems with easements and all of that good stuff, because, you know, we do have situations where those are issues, who are we contacting? Is that you, or where do we go in Alamance County for that?
So planning department approves easements on plats and whatever. So that would be a good place to start to see what documentation we would have on easements. And then register deeds should have you a plat or some kind of easement deed recorded if there's a legal easement there. But you can start with planning and then kind of we feel our way through what the situation is.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you for that. questions? Any final questions? No final questions?
Any shockers, any aha moments?
You know, people surprise me every day on what they think is okay and becomes completely else. I actually have a bar that opened up and it's serving alcohol. I'm like, I am your worst nightmare. Don't get me wrong, because you've totally not done anything you wanted. But ALE will come and burn you for serving alcohol without their permissions. I mean, come on, people, y'all have to think through these things. But yeah, that's this week's, oh my God, what was he thinking moment?
Wow. 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 This was really good. This has really been eye-opening. Oh, Melissa. Can't hear you.
Oh, you're muted.
She's working on it. She's working on it.
Yeah. Gotta unmute. There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think my biggest question is, what's a material fact? Okay, we're in the real estate business, right? What is a material fact? When we're having these conversations with our sellers, what is a material fact? And how deep are we supposed to go in asking questions or supplying this kind of information?
I'd say there's two ways to do it, depending on what kind of client you have. I know y'all have all kinds. Ones that feel defensive if you so ask, do you have the permits? Can I get a copy of those? Or if you don't feel like that's a comfortable place, once you get done with your client, you call us and ask if we have the documentation and what information we have. And they can go back to them and say, building inspection doesn't have this. We probably need to look into getting this straight before you list. Because that's a disclosure thing. Once y'all know these things, I mean, that's just something that you know now, and you have to let it be known. And your work, I know you're working for them, but it's protecting them as well.
Right. Exactly.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Melissa, for that question.
But then in the event someone does not want to answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is real estate. This is not you, Tonya, but in the event that they do not want to answer, or they don't know how to properly answer, is that where we tell them to check no representation?
If they do not know, if they cannot definitively answer yes or no, and we've had situations where this has happened, where they've said no to something, and they maybe knew or knew but didn't know the extent of it. Sellers have been held liable for those things. So if they do not know, then they need to plead the fifth.
That's right. And now some people, you know, properties change hands. So maybe fourth owner down didn't know the third owner did something. So they really are truthful that they did not know.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I see a question from Sarah. What sorts of codes need to be brought up if changing single family homes to duplex, other than the addition of firewalls? Are there any other examples, Tonya, that you can share of code change?
Yeah, so you've got building code is that firewall piece. And then you're going to have to find a way to separate the mechanical piece where they can have air conditioned heat on both sides, because you have to be able to regulate any building to a 68 degrees no matter what all year long. And so they have to be able to regulate that themselves, which usually means that there's some electrical, going to have to put a separate electrical box up so that each one runs its own. Each one's going to need its own power, because you wouldn't want to rely on your neighbor to pay the power bill. So each one has to have their own power. Duke Power sets 2 meters. So all these boxes have to be separated too.
Mhm.
And of course, we do addressing here in our office too. So you end up with 2 addresses on those units. And that Duke Power will generally, I won't say will not, because they're not always consistent, but generally they do not set 2 meters at the same address. So you're going to have to put a separate address on stuff to get 2 meters.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good questions. Any final questions? We're at 1:54. We want to be respectful of everyone's time, and especially Tonya's time. And we thank you so much, Tonya,
Absolutely.
for being here. This was eye-opening. aha moments for me. I've learned a lot. I will be looking at the recording, even though I was here. I will be looking at the recording again.
Well, I'm constantly working on our website and stuff too, to try to put out handouts and things that we have consistent concerns with. So keep checking back. We try to put out all updates from the state and everything on there too.
This was awesome. Awesome. Everybody, thank Tonya for being here with us today. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you so
much.
much, Tonya. I don't know if you want to sign off, or do we have anything else, Tiffany?
Well, normally I just cover a couple of P&P, but we can do that next time.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or issues, any burning, pressing issues that anyone's having that you need to bring up before we go? No? All right. Seems like all is well.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We are grateful to Tonya. So we now have a contact that if we don't know, and if our sellers don't know, we need to tell them they need to be calling Tonya's department before they do anything. So they can be in compliance with the state and with the county and all that good stuff, and we don't get in trouble. You know, we can CYA everybody. All right, folks. Thank you again, Tonya. Thank you all, KWC. And as Tiffany always says, we are so glad you asked. We'll see you in 2 weeks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.